I walked into the rehearsal dinner, exhausted and seeking family comfort, only for my father Daniel to sneer, "Here comes the bartender." They laughed, dismissing me as a failure. But when Logan, my sister's fiancé, shook my hand, he didn't laugh. He turned ghost white. The flight had been brutal. 14 hours in the air, even in a lie-flat seat, takes a toll on the body, especially when your mind hasn't stopped racing since takeoff. I had spent the entire duration of the journey over the Atlantic reviewing acquisition contracts, redlining aggressive clauses, and strategizing a hostile takeover that would solidify my company's dominance on the West Coast. My eyes burned, gritty with lack of sleep, and a dull, throbbing headache had taken up permanent residence behind my left temple. I was physically depleted, operating on caffeine and sheer willpower, but I had made it. I was here. I stood outside the heavy oak doors of the restaurant, taking a moment to compose myself. My reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked polished but undeniably weary. I had opted for a simple, understated black dress, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. That was the rule when I came home. In my world, the world of high-stakes hospitality and nightlife investment, I wore power like a second skin. Here, I had to shrink. I had to dim the lights so I wouldn't blind them. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the private dining room my sister, Margaret, had rented for her rehearsal dinner. The air was thick with the scent of expensive wine and roasted meats, the ambient noise a low hum of polite conversation and clinking silverware. For a split second, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe, just maybe, the occasion of Margaret's wedding would soften the jagged edges of our family dynamic. That hope died the second my father, Daniel, spotted me. He was holding court at the head of the table, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking every bit the patriarch he believed himself to be. He turned, his eyes narrowing as they landed on me. The conversation at the table dipped, then silenced completely. "Well," Daniel announced, his voice booming slightly, projecting to the entire room. "Look who finally decided to clock out." I forced a smile, walking toward them, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "Hi, Dad. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm a bit late. The flight was delayed, I'm sure," Daniel interrupted, swirling his drink. He looked at the man sitting next to Margaret, a man I assumed was Logan, the groom I hadn't met yet due to my schedule. Daniel leaned in, loud enough for the waiters to hear. "She's always late. Probably had to cover a shift, right? It's hard to get time off when you're living on tips." A ripple of laughter went through the table. Margaret covered her mouth, giggling, her eyes dancing with malicious delight. "Dad, please," I said, my voice tight. I reached the table and placed a hand on the back of an empty chair. "I just wanted to be here for Margaret." Daniel snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound that felt like a slap. He looked at Logan, then gestured to me with his glass. "Logan, this is Claire, my other daughter. Don't ask her for investment advice. But if you need a margarita, she's your girl. She's just a bartender." The humiliation was instant and visceral. It wasn't just the words, it was the casualness of it. The absolute certainty in his voice that I was nothing, that my life amounted to serving drinks to people like them. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a simmering, volcanic anger I had to suppress. I looked at Margaret, hoping for a defense, a correction, anything. She just smirked, adjusting the diamond on her finger. "Grab a seat, Claire. Try not to talk about work. We want to keep things classy tonight." I gripped the chair, my knuckles turning white. I had just closed a deal worth more than this entire building, yet here I was, reduced to a punchline. "It's good to see you too, Margaret," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. The betrayal wasn't the lie. It was that they preferred the lie because it made them feel superior. It was worse than the exhaustion, worse than the headache. The betrayal was realizing that to my own father, my perceived failure was his favorite dinner conversation. I sat down. The chair felt hard, uncomfortable, or maybe that was just my body rejecting the environment. I poured myself a glass of water from the carafe on the table, my hand trembling slightly. I told myself it was low blood sugar, but I knew better. It was adrenaline. It was the fight-or-flight response kicking in, urging me to run back to the airport, call my pilot, and disappear back to a life where I was respected. But I couldn't. I had promised Mom before she passed that I would look out for Margaret. I had promised I would keep the peace. "So Claire," Margaret said, her voice dripping with faux concern as she leaned over the table. "Did you manage to get the whole weekend off, or do you have to rush back too? What's the name of that dive bar you work at?" "The Alchemist," I said quietly. It wasn't a dive bar. It was the name of my holding company, the Alchemist Group, which owned 32 premier venues across 3 continents. But years ago, when I told them I was starting The Alchemist, they assumed it was a pub. I never corrected them. Why would I? They never asked a follow-up question. "Right, The Alchemist," Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Sounds like a place where dreams go to die. I hope you brought a nice dress for the ceremony, Claire. Logan's family comes from money, real money. We don't want you looking like you just came off a double shift." I took a sip of water, the cool liquid doing little to settle the acid in my stomach. "I have a dress, Dad, it's fine." "Fine," Margaret echoed, rolling her eyes. "That's her trademark." "Fine." "Logan, honey, you have to understand, Claire has always been the free spirit. While I was getting my MBA, she was learning how to mix a cosmopolitan." I looked at my sister. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there when we were kids. She was enjoying this. She was feeding on my diminished status to elevate her own. It was a dynamic we had fallen into years ago, but tonight, with an audience, it felt particularly cruel. "Actually," I said, my voice steadying, "I've been quite busy lately. The industry is changing." "The industry," Daniel scoffed. "Please, Claire, you pour liquids into glasses, don't call it an industry. It's a service, you're a servant." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted metallic tang. The waiter arrived to take my order, and for a brief moment there was silence. I ordered the filet, rare. "Big spender," Daniel muttered. "I assume you're expecting me to cover that." "I can pay for my own dinner, Dad," I said, my patience fraying. "With what, tip money?" He laughed again, looking around the table for approval. Most of the guests, Margaret's friends, distant cousins, smiled awkwardly, unsure if they should join in. They were uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. Nobody ever spoke up. I looked down at my plate, the white porcelain gleaming under the chandelier. They saw a woman in a simple black dress, beaten down by life, scraping by on minimum wage. They saw a disappointment. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that The Alchemist wasn't just a name I picked out of a hat. It was a philosophy. It was about turning base metals into gold. It was about taking nothing and turning it into everything. And in my line of work, information was the most valuable currency of all. I knew exactly who Logan was. I knew exactly who his rich family was. And more importantly, I knew that the merger his firm had been desperate to close for the last 6 months, the one that would make or break his career, was currently sitting in a pending folder on my encrypted laptop, waiting for my final signature. They thought I was the help. They had no idea I was the bank. To understand why I let this charade go on for so long, you have to understand Daniel. My father didn't respect labor. He respected titles. If you weren't a doctor, a lawyer, or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that he recognized from the nightly news, you were nobody. When I was 22, I dropped out of law school, his dream for me, to buy a failing nightclub in Chicago with a loan I begged from a grandmother who believed in me. Daniel didn't speak to me for 2 years. He told everyone I had run off to party. When I turned that club into the hottest venue in the city and sold it for a 400% profit to fund my next 2 ventures, he didn't care. He didn't understand equity or brand valuation or liquidity events. He just saw that I was working in bars. I tried to tell him once, 5 years ago. I tried to explain the scope of my business. He interrupted me to ask if I could get his friend a discount on a beer. I stopped trying after that. It was easier to be the disappointment he expected than the success he couldn't comprehend. It saved me from his jealousy, and it saved me from his constant requests for money, requests he freely made of Margaret, who was constantly in debt despite her prestigious job in marketing. I looked up from my plate to finally study Logan. He was handsome in a generic, polished way, expensive suit, likely custom, a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than my father's car. He had the confident, slightly bored posture of a man who has never been told no in his life. "So," Logan said, his voice smooth, finally addressing me directly. He didn't look me in the eye, he was looking past me, scanning the room as if looking for someone more important. "Daniel tells me you're in hospitality. That's cute." "It pays the bills," I said neutrally. "I bet," Logan smirked. "I'm in private equity. We deal with hospitality groups sometimes, mostly distressed assets, buying up the little guys who don't know how to run a business, stripping them for parts, that sort of thing." "Sounds charming," I said. "It's capitalism, Claire," he said patronizingly, finally locking eyes with me. His eyes were cold, assessing. He was trying to figure out if I was attractive enough to hit on later or if I was simply beneath notice. "You wouldn't understand the complexities. It's a lot of big numbers." "I can imagine," I replied, taking a sip of my wine. "Is there a specific sector you focus on?" Logan laughed, a short, sharp bark. "I'm currently working on a massive acquisition, the biggest in the sector. We're targeting a group called The Alchemist. Ever heard of it?" "No, probably not. They're high-end." "Not really, they." Shot and a beer crowd. My heart stopped, then hammered a double-time rhythm against my ribs. He was targeting my company. No, that wasn't right. We weren't for sale. Unless he was talking about the partnership deal. We had been fielding offers for a minority stakeholder to help expand into the Asian market. One of the firms was Vanguard Capital. "Vanguard?" I asked, the word slipping out before I could stop it. Logan froze, his fork hovered halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, his brow furrowed. "How do you know who I work for? I didn't mention Vanguard." "Dad mentioned it," I lied smoothly, though my pulse was racing. "He brags about you." "Right," Logan said slowly, his arrogance faltering for a split second before reassembling itself. "Well, yes, Vanguard. We're closing the Alchemist deal on Monday. The CEO is some recluse woman. Nobody's ever met her face to face. She sends her lawyers for everything. Probably a figurehead. We're going to gut management the second the ink is dry." He grinned at Daniel. "That's how you make real money, Daniel. You cut the fat." "Exactly," Daniel beamed, raising his glass. Here to cutting the fat, and to Margaret for marrying a winner." Margaret beamed, leaning her head on Logan's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, honey." I stared at Logan. He was going to gut management. He was planning a hostile restructuring on a minority stake deal. That was explicitly against the terms sheet we had sent over. He was lying to his bosses, or he was planning to breach contract immediately. "Well," Logan said, turning back to me with a predatory glint in his eyes. "Enough about high finance. It must be boring for you. Tell me, Claire. Can you make a decent old-fashioned? The bartender here is incompetent. Maybe you should hop back there and show him how it's done. Earn your keep for the dinner." Daniel laughed loudly. "Go on, Claire, show us your talents." I stood up. The table went quiet, expecting me to yell or maybe to cry. Instead, I walked around the table. I moved toward Logan. I extended my hand. "I don't think we've been properly introduced," I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the sister persona and slipping into the voice I used in boardrooms. "I'm Claire." Logan looked confused, but habit forced him to stand up and take my hand. Yeah, we met. Logan." "No," I said, tightening my grip. I stared into his eyes, letting the facade drop completely. "You're Logan from Vanguard Capital, the junior VP handling the Asian expansion partnership, and you think the CEO is a figurehead." Logan's hand went limp in mine, his smile wavered. "How do you know my title?" "Because," I said, leaning in close enough that only he could hear the steel in my voice. "I read the dossier on you this morning, and frankly, your risk assessment was sloppy." Logan frowned, pulling his hand back as if burned. He looked at my face, really studied it. The lighting was dim, but he saw something. He saw the confidence. He saw the familiarity. Then it clicked. He had seen my photo. Not in a family album, but in the trade magazines he claimed to read. Or perhaps in the due diligence folder he should have memorized. He turned pale. A sickly gray wash swept over his face. He looked from me to Daniel to Margaret and then back to me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Logan," Margaret asked, her smile fading. "Honey, what's wrong?" Logan didn't answer. He fumbled for his phone in his pocket, his hands shaking. He unlocked it and frantically tapped the screen. "What is it?" Daniel asked, annoyed. "Claire, what did you say to him?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching Logan doom scroll. He stopped tapping. He stared at his screen. Then he looked up at me, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. It was the sound of a bomb that had just landed in the center of the table, ticking down to 0. The silence stretched, thin and brittle, until it was almost deafening. Every eye at the table was fixed on Logan. He looked like he was about to be sick. The color had drained so completely from his face that he looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the chandelier. "Logan," Margaret's voice was sharp now, laced with panic. She grabbed his arm. "What is on your phone? What is going on?" Logan didn't answer her. He couldn't take his eyes off me. He looked down at his phone screen again, then back at me, as if confirming a nightmare. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. It's you," he whispered. His voice was a rasp, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. "What's me?" I asked, my voice cool, calm, and utterly unbothered. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. "Is there a problem, Logan?" You're C. Reynolds," he stammered. "Reynolds is my middle name," I said simply. "I use it professionally." "What are you two talking about?" Daniel barked, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "Logan, put that damn phone away. Claire, stop bothering him with your nonsense." But Logan didn't put the phone away. He practically shoved it across the table toward Daniel. His hand was shaking so badly the phone spun on the tablecloth. "Look at it," Logan hissed, his voice trembling. "Just look at it." Daniel scowled, fishing his reading glasses from his breast pocket. He put them on with exaggerated annoyance and peered at the screen. Margaret leaned over his shoulder, squinting. On the screen was a Forbes article from 3 months ago. The headline, "The Alchemist's Gold: How C. Reynolds Built a Hospitality Empire from Scratch." Below it was a professional headshot of me, hair slicked back, wearing a white power suit, looking directly into the camera with a gaze that could cut glass. And below that, a net worth estimation that had 9 zeros. I watched Daniel's face. First there was confusion. He blinked, adjusting his glasses, then disbelief. He looked at the photo, then up at me, then back at the photo. Finally, shock, pure, unadulterated shock. His mouth fell open, creating a perfect O of stupidity. "This," Daniel looked up, his eyes wide. "This is you." "That's me," I said, cutting into my steak. It was perfectly cooked. "The bartender." Margaret gasped. She snatched the phone from the table, scrolling frantically. No, this can't be right. Founder and CEO, 32 venues, estimated valuation. This is fake. Claire, did you make a fake website?" "It's Forbes, Margaret," Logan croaked. He looked like he was hyperventilating. "It's not a fake website, it's the industry Bible." He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Claire, Ms. Reynolds, I didn't know the name. I just assumed." "You assumed," I said, putting my fork down. "You assumed a lot of things, Logan. Just like you assumed you could brag about gutting my management team in front of my family. Just like you assumed the CEO was a figurehead you could steamroll." "I was joking," Logan said quickly, a desperate, sweaty smile plastering onto his face. "Just locker room talk, you know how it is. We respect the current leadership immensely. The Alchemist culture is, It's legendary. Is it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because 5 minutes ago, we were little guys who didn't know how to run a business. I pulled my own phone out. You know, Logan, due diligence goes both ways. While you were busy mocking my dress, I sent a text to my chief legal officer. I tapped the screen and held it up. A simple message response, confirmed, breach of faith, term sheet pulled. What does that mean? Logan whispered. It means, I said, that the deal is dead. Vanguard isn't getting a piece of The Alchemist, and I'm going to make sure every other major operator in the city knows exactly why. Logan looked like he had been shot. He slumped back in his chair, putting his head in his hands. My boss, he's going to kill me. This was the quarterly maker, if I lose this. You already lost it, I said. The room was deadly silent. The distant cousins were staring with their mouths open. The waiters had stopped moving. Daniel, however, was recovering. His shock was rapidly shifting into something else, opportunism. He cleared his throat, pushing his plate away and leaning forward with a sudden, oily smile. Now, Claire, he said, his voice dripping with a sickening sweetness I hadn't heard in years. Let's not be hasty. This is incredible news. My daughter, a CEO, I always knew you had it in you. I always told everyone you were special. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. You told everyone I was a disappointment, I corrected him. You told everyone I was a servant. Oh, nonsense. Daniel waved his hand dismissively. That was just tough love, motivation, and look, it worked, didn't it? You wanted to prove me wrong, and you did. I'm proud of you, honey, truly. He looked at Logan, then back to me. But let's not ruin your sister's happiness over a little business misunderstanding. Logan is family now. Surely you can reconsider for family. Margaret latched onto this lifeline immediately. Yes, Claire, don't be selfish. Logan has worked so hard for this. If you ruin his job, how are we going to afford the house, the honeymoon? That sounds like a you problem, I said coldly. Claire, Margaret screeched. You can't do this. You have all this money, apparently, and you never told us. You let us struggle. Dad's car needs repairs. I have student loans. And you've been sitting on millions. I didn't sit on it, I said. I earned it, while you were mocking me, while you were telling me I wasn't good enough to sit at this table. We were joking, Margaret cried, tears real or fake, I couldn't tell, welling up in her eyes. We're family. Family helps each other. Family doesn't treat each other like garbage until they find out there's a payout, I shot back. I stood up. I've lost my appetite. Wait, Daniel stood up too, reaching for my arm. Claire, sit down. Let's discuss this like adults. You can't just walk out. We need to figure out how to manage this wealth. You need a financial advisor. I can help you. I know people. I have a CFO, Dad, I said, stepping out of his reach. I don't need your help. But Logan, Daniel pointed at the groom, who was still catatonic. You can't destroy him. He's the golden goose. Not anymore, I said, glancing at Logan. Looks like the goose is cooked. I turned to leave, but Logan suddenly stood up. The panic in his eyes had hardened into something darker, desperation. You can't leave, he said, his voice shaking with rage. You can't just walk away. We have a verbal agreement. My firm has already allocated the funds. If you pull out now, I'll sue you. I'll sue you for bad faith negotiation. I stopped. I turned back slowly. Bad faith? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Logan, you just admitted to a room full of witnesses that you plan to fire my team and breach the operational clauses of our contract. That's not bad faith on my part. That's fraud on yours. I'll destroy you, he shouted, losing control. I know people. I'll make sure no one in this town does business with you. I own this town, Logan, I said softly. I walked out of the private room, the heavy doors swinging shut behind me, muffling the sound of Margaret's sobbing and Daniel's shouting. I didn't go to my hotel. I went to the one place in this town where I felt safe, the site of my very first acquisition, a small, historic jazz lounge downtown called the Blue Note. I had bought it anonymously 3 years ago through a shell company, keeping the original staff and vibe. It was my sanctuary. I sat in the back booth, the dim lighting and saxophone music washing over me. I ordered a sparkling water and closed my eyes. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "Claire, answer your phone. We need to talk. This is childish." Followed by another. "Logan is threatening to call off the wedding if he loses his job. Do you want that on your conscience?" And another from Margaret. "I hate you. You've always been jealous of me. Fix this now." I turned my phone off. But the peace didn't last long. About an hour later, the manager, an old friend named Sarah who knew my secret, walked over. She looked worried. "Claire," she whispered, "there's a guy at the bar, says he knows you, says he's your brother-in-law." I sighed. Of course, Logan knew the industry. He knew the blue note was part of the portfolio, even if my family didn't. He had come to beg, or threat. "Send him back," I said. Logan walked to the booth. He looked disheveled. His tie was loosened, his hair messy. He had clearly been drinking since I left. He slid into the booth opposite me without asking. "You ruined my life," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You ruined it yourself," I replied. "I just turned on the lights." "I can fix it," he said, leaning in. "I can smooth it over with Vanguard. I'll tell them we're family, that it's a merger of interests. We can spin this, but you have to sign the deal. Tonight." "No," I said. "Why not?" he snapped. "Because I made a joke? Because your dad is a dick? Grow up, Claire. This is business. It's millions of dollars." "It's not about the joke, Logan," I said. "It's about the fact that you're a liability. You're arrogant, you're loose-lipped, and you don't respect the product. Why would I partner with someone who wants to destroy what I built?" "Because if you don't," Logan said, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper, "I'm going to tell everyone about your little start." I narrowed my eyes. "Excuse me." "I did some digging," Logan sneered. "While your dad was yelling, I called a buddy in Chicago. He remembers you. He remembers how you got the money for that first club. Rumor is you didn't just borrow it from Grandma. Rumor is you were dating a certain married senator at the time. Senator Reynolds." I froze. Senator Reynolds was my grandfather, my mother's father, the one Daniel hated because he cut Daniel out of the will. I used his name as my middle name to honor him. But to the outside world, Reynolds was a common name. "You think I slept my way to the top?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I think it makes for a great story," Logan grinned, thinking he had won. "Bartender turned CEO via the bedroom. The press would eat it up. Your stock price would tank. Your investors would panic." He leaned back, looking smug. "So, here's the deal. You sign the Vanguard contract. You give me a seat on the board. And in exchange, I keep my mouth shut about your senator friend." I stared at him. I wasn't scared. I was amazed. He was trying to blackmail me with a lie that was easily disprovable, but damaging in the short term. He was desperate. "You're going to blackmail me?" I asked. "I'm negotiating," he corrected. "Okay," I said. "Go ahead, run the story." Logan blinked. "What?" "Run it," I said. "Call TMZ. Call Page 6. Tell them I slept with Senator Reynolds." "I will," he threatened. "Good," I said, "because Senator Reynolds was my grandfather, and I have the trust documents, the birth certificates, and the probate records to prove it. And when you print that libel, I will sue you for everything you have. I will sue Vanguard for creating a hostile work environment. I will bury you in so much litigation that your grandchildren will be paying my legal fees." Logan's face fell. "Grandfather." "He left me the seed money and a trust because he knew Daniel would drink it away," I explained. "He believed in me, unlike you." I stood up. "Get out of my bar, Logan, before I have security throw you out." Logan scrambled out of the booth. He looked small, defeated. But as he walked away, I knew it wasn't over. He was a cornered rat, and rats bite. The next morning was the wedding day. I debated not going, but that would look like defeat, and I needed to protect Margaret, even if she didn't deserve it. If Logan was willing to blackmail me, what was he doing to her? I arrived at the church just as guests were starting to file in. My phone had been blowing up all night. Daniel had left voicemails ranging from pleading to screaming. Margaret had sent texts accusing me of ruining her big day. I stood in the vestibule, watching the guests arrive. Daniel was there, greeting people, playing the happy father of the bride. When he saw me, he marched over, grabbing my arm and pulling me into a side room. "You," he hissed, "you ungrateful, selfish little." "Careful, Dad," I warned. "Remember who you're talking to." "I'm talking to my daughter," he shouted. "Who cares if you have money? You have no heart. Logan is a mess. He's in the vestry right now, drinking. He says he lost his job this morning. Vanguard fired him." "Good," I said. "They have standards." "He says it's your fault," Daniel ranted. "He says you called his boss." "I did," I admitted. "I sent the recording." "Recording?" Daniel paused. "The security cameras at the Blue Note have excellent audio," I said. "I sent the recording of his blackmail attempt to Vanguard's ethics committee this morning. They didn't take kindly to their VP trying to extort a potential partner." Daniel's face went pale. You got him fired on his wedding day." "He got himself fired," I said. "I just reported a crime." "Margaret is going to be devastated," Daniel moaned. "She's marrying an unemployed man." "She shouldn't marry him at all," I said. "He's a liar and a manipulator." "She loves him," Daniel yelled. "And he loves her. This is just business stress. You don't understand love, Claire. You're cold. That's why you're alone." Just then, the door to the side room opened. It was Margaret. She was in her wedding dress, looking stunning, but her eyes were red and puffy. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice trembling. Logan is acting weird. He's yelling at the groomsmen, he says. He says we have to cancel the honeymoon, that we're broke." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Did you do this?" "Margaret," I said gently, "Logan lied to you. He's not who you think he is." "He said you got him fired," she cried. "He said you were jealous and you sabotaged him." "He tried to blackmail me, Margaret," I said. "He threatened to ruin my reputation if I didn't give him money." "I don't believe you," Margaret screamed. "He's a good man. He takes care of me. Unlike you, you're just a bartender who got lucky, and now you think you're better than us." "I never thought I was better than you," I said sadly. "I just wanted you to see me." "Well, I see you now," she spat. "I see a bitter, lonely woman who wants to destroy my happiness. Get out of my wedding." "Margaret, listen to me," I pleaded. "He's using you, he need this marriage to look stable for his promotion. He doesn't respect you. He made fun of you last night when you weren't listening." "Liar," she shrieked. "Get out." Daniel stepped between us. "You heard her, Claire. Leave. You're not wanted here." I looked at them. My father, red-faced and protecting the illusion of status. My sister, blinded by desperation to be a wife. They were so terrified of the truth that they would rather cling to a sinking ship. "Fine," I said. "I'll go, but before I do, ask him about the dowry." Margaret froze. "What?" "The dowry," I repeated. "The $50,000 Dad gave him last week. Ask him where it is." Daniel looked shocked. How do you know about that?" "Because," I said, "I ran a full background check. Logan has a gambling debt, a big one. That 50 grand didn't go to the wedding vendors. It went to a bookie in Vegas." "That's a lie," Daniel shouted. "It was for the venue deposit." "Call the venue," I challenged. "Ask them if they've been paid." I turned and walked to the door. "I'll be in the parking lot. If you want the truth, come find me. If you want to marry a fraud, well, that's your choice." I walked out into the bright sunlight. I leaned against my rental car, a modest sedan, and waited. I gave it 10 minutes. 10 minutes for the doubt to fester. 10 minutes for Daniel to make that phone call. 10 minutes for the house of cards to fall. 7 minutes later, the church doors flew open. But it wasn't Margaret, it was Logan, and he had a gun. The sight of the gun, a small, snub-nosed revolver, stopped my heart for a split second. The bright afternoon sun glinted off the black metal, a surreal contrast to the festive floral arrangements flanking the church steps. Guests who were mingling outside screamed and scattered, diving behind cars and rushing back into the sanctuary. "You," Logan screamed, stumbling down the steps. He was unhinged, his tuxedo jacket torn, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You ruined everything." I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood frozen by my car, my mind racing. This wasn't a boardroom negotiation. This wasn't a hostile takeover. This was life or death. "Logan, put the gun down," I said, keeping my voice level though my hands were trembling. "This isn't going to fix anything." "Fix it," he laughed hysterically, waving the gun erratically. "There is no fixing this. Vanguard blacklisted me, the bookie is going to break my legs, and now Margaret knows, she knows about the money." "So you're going to shoot me?" I asked, slowly raising my hands. "How does that help you, Logan? You'll go to prison for life." "I don't care," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "If I'm going down, I'm taking the golden girl with me. You think you're so smart with your billions and your secret companies. You think you can just look down on me." "I never looked down on you," I said softly. "I just saw who you were." "Shut up," he raised the gun, aiming it directly at my chest. "Logan, stop." The scream came from the church doors. It was Margaret. She ran out onto the steps, her massive white dress billowing around her. Daniel was right behind her, looking terrified and old. "Margaret, get back," Logan yelled, not taking his eyes off me. "No," Margaret shouted, running down the steps toward him. "Logan, please, don't do this. We can figure this out." "There is no we anymore, Maggie," Logan spat. "Your dad called the venue. He knows I stole the money. It's over." "I don't care about the money," Margaret cried, stopping a few feet from him. "I care about you. Put the gun down." "He doesn't love you, Margaret," I said, my voice cutting through the hysteria. "He used you. He used Dad. He's a parasite." "Shut up." Logan swung the gun toward me again, his finger tightening on the trigger. "No," Margaret lunged. It happened in slow motion. Margaret, in her heavy gown, threw herself at Logan. The gun went off. Crack. The sound was like a whip crack, sharp and final. Margaret fell back, a bloom of red spreading instantly across the white lace of her bodice. "Maggie," Daniel screamed, a sound of pure primal anguish. Logan dropped the gun. He looked at his hands, then at Margaret lying on the concrete. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "No, no, I didn't mean to." I didn't wait. I sprinted toward them. I kicked the gun away, sending it skittering under a parked car, and dropped to my knees beside my sister. "Margaret," I pressed my hands over the wound on her shoulder. It was high, near the collarbone. "Margaret, look at me." She blinked, her eyes unfocused, her face pale. "Claire," she whispered, Did I save you?" "You're an idiot," I choked out, tears finally spilling over. "You're a brave, stupid idiot." Sirens wailed in the distance. Daniel was on his knees on the other side of her, holding her hand, weeping openly. "I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have seen him." Logan was curled into a ball on the pavement, rocking back and forth, muttering to himself as the police cruisers screeched into the lot. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting commands. "Get down, hands in the air." As they tackled Logan, cuffing him and dragging him away, I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on my sister. "Hold on, Margaret," I whispered. "Help is here. You're going to be okay." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Claire, I'm sorry for everything." "SHH," I said, brushing the hair from her forehead. "We'll talk later, just breathe." The recovery was slow, but steady. The bullet had shattered Margaret's clavicle but missed major arteries. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't leave town. I rented a suite at the nearby hotel and worked remotely, spending every evening in her hospital room. The dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Daniel was a broken man. The revelation of Logan's true nature, combined with the near loss of his favorite daughter, had shattered his ego. He sat by her bed for hours, silent, holding her hand. He couldn't look me in the eye for the first week. When he finally did, it was in the hospital cafeteria. I was getting coffee. He walked up, looking older, smaller. "Claire," he said, his voice raspy. "Dad," I acknowledged. He struggled with the words. "I don't know how to apologize for all of it, for not believing in you, for pushing her toward him." "You were blinded by what you wanted to see," I said. "You wanted the picture-perfect family so badly you ignored the cracks." "I know," he nodded, staring at his shoes. "I was a fool, and I was jealous when I saw that article. I felt like I had failed. My daughter didn't need me. She surpassed me." "I never needed your money, Dad," I said gently. "I just needed your respect." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You have it. You have more than that. You have my admiration." It wasn't a perfect fix. Years of neglect don't vanish overnight, but it was a start. Margaret was harder. She had to come to terms with the fact that her fiancé was a monster who had nearly killed her. She had to face the humiliation of the canceled wedding, the gossip, the debt he left behind. But she didn't have to face it alone. I paid off the venue. I paid off the credit cards Logan had maxed out in her name. And when she was discharged, I offered her a job, not as a bartender, but in the marketing department of the Alchemist Group. "I don't want charity," she had said, sitting in her wheelchair. "It's not charity," I told her. "You have a degree, you have an eye for trends. And frankly, I need someone I can trust who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being a bitch." She smiled, a weak, genuine smile. "I can definitely do that." Logan pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and fraud. With the evidence I provided, the recordings, the financial records, and the testimony of a dozen witnesses, he was sentenced to 15 years. He would be an old man before he saw a boardroom again. 6 months later, I walked into the grand opening of our newest venue in Tokyo. The lights were dazzling, the music pulsing. I wore a dress that cost more than my first car. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. But my eyes were scanning the room for 2 specific people. I found them near the VIP bar. Margaret, looking healthy and sharp in a tailored suit, was directing a team of servers. Daniel was sitting at a table nearby, sipping a club soda, watching her with pride. When he saw me, he stood up. He didn't sneer. He didn't make a joke about bartending. He smiled. He raised his glass. "To the boss," he mouthed. I smiled back, raising my own glass. "To the family," I whispered. The road had been long and the cost had been high. But as I looked at them, really looked at them, free of the lies and the pretense, I knew we had finally arrived. We weren't perfect. We were scarred. But for the first time in my life, we were real. And that was worth more than all the gold in the world.